So let's talk about how Hitler is able to come to power by other countries' policies of appeasement. So appeasement is giving in to someone's demands in order to avoid war. France and Britain, especially, are going to give in to demand after demand of Hitler until he industrialize, industrializes Germany again, fixes their economy, builds up their military, and starts to take over more land. So let's talk about Spain. We haven't talked about Spain in a while, and this is kind of leads to the start and test of Hitler's power. So basically, there's going to be a Spanish civil war that breaks out, where Italy and Germany are going to use it to like basically test all of these new technologies, their new guns, their new weapons, their new tanks, their new airplanes. So Hitler and Mussolini want to promote fascism in Spain in 1936 to spread their ideas. Like the Popular Front we talked about in France, Spain also has one. It achieved success in voting a lot of socialist and communist into the government for economic reforms. However, unlike France, Spain is going to have a full civil war when Francisco Franco, who was a very strong anti communist fascist, got help from Hitler and Mussolini. So remember, Hitler and Mussolini would help because he's also a fascist trying to spread their ideas. However, the USSR is going to back the communist in Spain, and they're going to be a civil war between the fascist and the communist. And each, Russia is going to support the communist, Italy and Germany are going to support the fascist, and the fascists are going to come out on top. The Germans were able to test their new planes and tanks and practice bombing cities. And it's sad that we talk about practicing war on, innocent people that are dying because of it, as well as their new strategy, Blitzkrieg. So Blitzkrieg means lightning war, and basically there's three different stages of it. The first stage is completely bombing by airplanes. You bomb the heck out of a city or location until you try to dismantle all of its defenses. Step two is you roll the tanks through to clean up whatever the airplanes missed. And then finally, step three, you send the soldiers through to occupy the area and get rid of any resistance. It's a very effective policy, which is going to lead to Germany taking over pretty much all of Europe besides England. And even more, it showed the weakness of Britain, France, and the United States, who saw Germany creating its military, breaking the Treaty of Versailles, and they did nothing to stop it. The U.S. never joined the League of Nations. Remember, the League of Nations is important to know. It was that peacekeeping agency after World War I. It was part of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points plan, but he couldn't get Congress to join it because they didn't want to get involved in another European war. Britain and France's economies had not yet recovered, and both were too afraid of another world war to stop Hitler by force. Francisco Franco is going to win the war due to the support from Italy and Germany, and he's going to rule as a totalitarian dictator all the way until the 1970s. So, pretty recent when we start talking about, world history. And here you can just see the destruction and fire bombings of, Spanish cities. And this is what a lot of European cities are going to be turned into during World War II. So, despite the requirements in the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler is going to basically say to Britain and France, "We're not afraid of you." He's going to start by putting military in the Rhineland, which is basically a zone that was supposed to be neutral between Germany and France. He's also going to invade the African nation of Ethiopia, which he wasn't supposed to do. He's not supposed to have an army. He's not supposed to be conquering land, and they're not going to do anything. So Germany and Italy are going to keep going. Hitler's next move was to annex and take over Austria in 1938. Most people there supported him as German speakers. And after just no opposition and him being able to do what he wants, Hitler was like, you know what? I want all German speaking people to be located in Germany. So he wanted to take over Czechoslovakia, Sudetenland, which is just areas of Czechoslovakia. And again, no one is stopping him. British Prime Minister Chamberlain led the way with Britain and France with this policy of appeasement, giving someone what they want in order to avoid war. The leaders of Britain, France, and Germany are going to meet in Munich, Germany in 1938, just a year before the war breaks out, and allow Hitler to take over more land. This is known as the Munich Agreement. So the Munich Agreement is an example of appeasement. That's important to know because it's a meeting where British and French leaders said, hey, you know what? Germany, you can take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. And they returned to their countries, Chamberlain in England, to applause and crowds cheering him on. and he says, "We've secured peace, averted war." No, Hitler played them for a fool. They allowed him to build up his military, industrialize, and take over colonies to get resources to rebuild and turn Germany into a world power. And now the consequences are going to have to be paid. But because they didn't do anything, he said he was just going to take the Sudetenland. He said, "You know what? I'm going to take over all of Czechoslovakia." And again, no one did anything. So Hitler's like, they're still not stopping me. Now I want our former territories back that we lost in World War One, which is what he was doing with Austria and Czechoslovakia. But now he put his eyes on Poland. And you can see this is all of the land that Germany is able to conquer, and no one does anything. So what was the point of the Treaty of Versailles? These are all just, like I said, pictures of that in the years that he took them over. But Hitler was made chancellor in 19. Let's look at a timeline, basically, of general what's going on. So in 1933, Hitler is made chancellor and comes into power. The same year they leave the League of Nations, which was that peacekeeping organization after World War One. In 1935, he starts rebuilding his military. So there's your violation of the Treaty of Versailles first. Mussolini and Hitler invade Ethiopia. Hitler takes over the Rhineland between Germany and France, again, breaking the Treaty of Versailles. Rome and Berlin Axis creates an alliance between Germany and Italy. In 1938, we already said Hitler and Mussolini helped Francisco Franco in the Spanish Civil War. In 1938, Hitler annexes or takes over Austria. He then also annexes the Sudetenland and all of Czechoslovakia for Lebensraum, I believe is how you say it. It means living space. Hitler is going to talk about Lebensraum or living space so often, basically saying that Germany needed to expand its borders in order to create more living space for Germans. This is when the Munich Agreement happened, which, remember, was a policy of appeasement. In 1939, he also goes to Russia and signs a non-aggression pact, which is exactly what it sounds like, or the Nazi and Soviet pact, where he goes to Stalin and says, "Hey, Stalin, I promise not to attack you if you promise not to attack me," and they agree to it. However, the war begins on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland. Britain and France finally declare war on Germany. Germany says, "Okay, there's no reason to keep our plans a secret." And right away, within the first few months of the war, they go through Belgium, conquer Belgium. They conquer France. They also conquer the Scandinavian countries of Denmark and Norway to use them for their resources and trade ports. The French and English troops that are fighting are going to be beat back all the way across France. There's literally chilling video of Hitler standing next to the Eiffel Tower in the middle of Paris, like during the war, because Germany was so industrialized and able to walk all over France. That brings us to the Battle or Retreat of Dunkirk. Dunkirk was a coastal city, and basically England and French troops were pushed all the way back up against the water on a beach area, and it's known because it's basically going to be them fighting off the Germans for as long as they can, while hundreds of thousands of Allied troops, especially from England and France, escape across the English Channel by any type of boat they can get their hands on, from a small, like personal one to big ferries and other naval ships. And they were able to save hundreds of thousands of soldiers' lives and live to fight another day. But France is completely knocked out of the war, and they established a Vichy government in France, which basically is a Nazi ally in France. The Nazis control France after they take them over and establish the Vichy government. The Luftwaffe is a name for the German Air Force, who's going to be very dominant. And because they were scared to attack England by land across the English Channel, most of the battle for Britain and the battle between Germany and England is going to take place on air raids on England, bombing whole cities, dogfights, which are planes in the air shooting at each other. We'll go through and talk about these things soon. But here are the major countries that you need to know that are involved in the war. The Axis powers, aka the bad guys, are Germany, Italy, and Japan are the major ones. The Allied powers, or the good guys in this case, are the United States, eventually, not at first, Russia, eventually, not at first, and England and France. Now, you might be saying, wait, I thought you just talked about a non-aggression pact between Hitler and Stalin. Why would Russia be on the Allied side? Well, Hitler is going to want more Lebensraum, living space, and more resources. So he's going to break that pact and invade Russia, just like Napoleon did. And we remember how it went for Napoleon. So this will be the last slide here. The main causes, the Treaty of Versailles. Why? It punished Germany when they were down. The war guilt clause, paying for reparations, having to give up their colonies and destroy their military. Appeasement, they didn't enforce the Treaty of Versailles. They let Germany reindustrialize. They let Germany build up their military. They let Germany take over more land, and they just kept doing it until Hitler was powerful. The non-aggression pact with Russia, when they agreed to not attack each other, and just like there's the main causes acronym we talk about for World War One. I don't have an acronym here, so I apologize. But remember, the immediate spark of World War One is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand from Austria by a Serbian nationalist. The spark that starts this war is the Germany invasion of Poland, because that's finally when Britain and France say, all right, that's enough. We have to declare war to stop this guy. But the Treaty of Versailles and appeasement would be more long term. I hope this is helpful. I hope you're able to make the connection all the way back from imperialism through World War One, through the economic problems and rise of totalitarian leaders between the wars to the start of World War II, which we will continue talking about tomorrow. I hope this is helping. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. See you tomorrow.